Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Bennett Tchaikovsky. I'm the accounting professor, and I'm very, very excited to have Miss Deanna Gutman here. If any of you are on my Tchaikovsky accounting alumni page, you know Deanna because I take her post that she puts up onto LinkedIn and said, hey, check this out. So now you're actually going to get to meet Deanna. It's pretty exciting. So we're going to talk today about life after public accounting and other general recruiting advice. Deanna, by the way, are you a CPA? I think
I
you
am
are.
not. I decided
But
no.
okay, but you did. Okay, this is what's crazy. Is this like? Oh, by the way, our disclaimer and copyright notice: the information and opinions of this presentation are those of the authors only, and not the authors' employers or affiliated organizations, including but not limited to Irvine Valley College, the South Orange County Community College District, and Deanna's firm, the Century Group. Presentation is for educational purposes only and does not constitute any legal or accounting advice whatsoever. This presentation is copyright 2023 by Bennett Tchaikovsky and Deanna Gutman. All rights are reserved. Any distribution without our prior written permission is strictly prohibited. Okay, about Deanna. And so here we go. So you went to UC Santa Barbara, right?
I did, yes.
And did you have Professor Henry Sander for accounting?
Yes, of course. The super famous, what was it? Economics 3B, Professor Sanders. We used
Yes.
to buy, I don't know if you remember this, but he was the toughest professor, right? Everyone was so
Oh my God.
oh my
Actually, my students today don't really like me when I teach intermediate because I'm like, when I tell, like, I had a student who took my intermediate accounting class and I said, I'm channeling my Henry Sander, and her
oh
boss went to
man.
UCSB and he started freaking out. He's all, wait a second, who is this guy? It's like, okay. But yeah, so
Yes.
Deanna, you have a ton of experience. You worked as an auditor at Arthur Andersen. You got your bachelor's degree in business economics with an emphasis in, wow, you got the emphasis in accounting. That's something I didn't do. And oh, cool, Slavic languages and literature. Wow, were you at UCSB for all 4 years?
I was, and I started out with chemistry, believe it or not. And I really, parents wanted me to be a pharmacist, wasn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Decided to do the accounting, and then at the end, I added the Slavic languages. But yeah, I was there for all 4 years.
That's nice. Yeah, obviously, science dropouts make great accountants, right? The math is a lot easier.
Right?
Okay,
No
we like engineering
kidding.
majors, we like biology majors, we love computer science majors. Any of those that have become accountants, it's
Yeah.
absolute a recruiter's dream.
That makes sense.
This is about the Century Group. It's award-winning and recruiting and staffing firm. I've known Deanna for I don't even know how long. It's been a very long time. Before I was even teaching, I think I was going to you for help in terms of recruitment. But they handle pretty much just about everybody, startup, mid-market, global 1000 enterprises on a direct hire, temp to hire basis. So if you have recruiting needs and you want to go talk to Deanna after this, I will make sure that I'm including her information in the very bottom. And when we look in terms of the reach, it's pretty much going to be everywhere. But these are the different areas. I know that there's a lot of job postings that are in LA, Costa Mesa, which is Irvine, which is right by us over here.
Yep.
Okay. So let's just kind of go through and just talking a little bit about how recruiters work. So when you're retained by a firm, by a company to say, okay, Deanna, I need a professional, basically just so I know, I think is it pretty rare that you're on retainer, or do you actually
Yeah.
go on retain? It's pretty rare if you're on retainer, meaning you get
Yeah.
paid monthly no
Yeah.
matter what.
Right. Usually we're a contingency based firm. So I would say 99% of our business is contingency based. And what that means for a lot of people that don't know is that a company can work with multiple recruiters. So versus being on a retainer, they're committed to one company and they can only use them. So we come in and we say, you could use us, you can use our competition, not a problem. We'll present our best qualified candidates and then you choose how you want to proceed.
Awesome. Okay, and then let's just kind of go through over here. Sorry, I lost that. Just give me 2 seconds.
Sure.
I'll just keep this on. I'll make it a little bit easier. Okay. Now, as far as, so just so you know that as candidates, right, you're never going to have to pay a fee to a recruiter. And that if anybody tells you, oh, you have to pay me to get a job, that's probably a scam and you
Right.
need to run the other way. Right. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So
yeah.
I call myself a matchmaker, or the middle person. The service to the person who was looking for the job is absolutely free. So how do we get paid? Why do I do this, right? Our company or a recruiter gets paid by the client. So say we're working with Disney or Paramount Pictures or any of the smaller startups or just any company, any of our clients. They pay us to save them time, to find them and deliver them a quality candidate. It's kind of, and a good example would be for those that have never used a recruiter is a realtor, right? The realtor is the middle person between a buyer and a seller. And the realtor knows what's hot on the market. What is, are there good schools in the area? Is the house, a great house? And they share that information with you and they show you things and they help you negotiate the price. And it's free to you as the buyer, right? So that's exactly kind of how we work. The service is free to you. I know all the ins and outs about different companies. I know the hiring managers. I know the culture. I'll be able to tell you if these guys work a lot of hours or it's absolutely quality of life. If the company's successful or they're kind of like, slowing down in terms of, their growth rate and stuff. So I have all the information to be able to share with you and match you up. So companies use recruiters and they pay us just to save them the time, just to save and get good people in front of them.
And by the way, just I can speak to this because I used to be a CFO. When you're going through and hiring, if I make a job posting on Craigslist or even now, like, or wherever I'm making the job posting, if I make the job posting on LinkedIn, you have no idea how much you are flooded in terms of resumes. I mean, it is insanity. And that's really why you have someone like Deanna sitting down, going through the different resumes. And again, is Deanna going to send you a candidate that's not a match? I mean, she's going to take your job description, compare it to the candidate's qualifications. And I think what happens is like, if I'm the hire, if I've retained Deanna, it's like, okay, Deanna, like let's go through the list. Yeah. And I think even you would say, okay, well, Bennett, these are really spot on. This person is coming from a little bit of a different place, but this is why I think you should take a look at this candidate. I think it might be a good fit because of your culture. And even though they might not meet everything, but I think that that's really a big, huge part in terms of like what you do. And that's why employers are willing to pay the percentage, because going through and screening through stuff, it takes a long time. Right. And oftentimes the hiring managers do not want to spend their time going through resumes and everything else. And you also have to be very careful too about the state of California, our human resources laws. We're almost getting close to France. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting close. And so there's a lot of reasons why you want to go through and use a recruiter. Right. I meant to ask you, so how do you generally tell candidates to prepare for interviews? Like, how do you get the candidates ready before they go into the company to interview?
Sure. I'll tell you, I've been in this industry for, over 20 years. I've been with the Century Group for 13. There has not been one single candidate that has been to an interview through me that I have not personally prepared.
Okay.
And I take a whole lot of pride in that because I think that's what really makes a candidate successful. And when you go to and apply to a company and you're interviewing, and you have somebody who's interviewing who just applied on LinkedIn, and then you have somebody who's interviewing through a Century Group or through Deanna, that person is going to be so much better prepared than the person that just applied online. So usually most of the time I'll go through what do you do in an interview and what you don't. And especially these days, there's so many different platforms. There is, virtual interviews, there's in-house interviews. And I literally walk you through the process of what to say, how to say it. A lot of the times also when I know my clients really well, I know what the people will be like, what type of questions they will ask. What interview styles they have. Will they be behavioral questions? Will they be technical questions? Or will it be just a great conversation like friends going out to dinner? So I give you all the 411. I tell you, again, what to say, what not to say, what things to look out for. So every single person that goes and interviews through me is fully prepared.
Right.
And better off and beats the competition because of that.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
then as far as like what I actually had a student yesterday who's going to be interviewing at PwC, and this is obviously a much earlier stage, but one of the things I always say is like be up, 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 right? And so it's like before you go on to like a TV show, you get really, really excited. Obviously like not like Red Bull excited, but we want to get like really like pumped up, like not
Yeah.
overly caffeinated, but caffeinated.
Right.
So are there any kind of like, is that's really when you're telling, candidates like hey, you want to be yourself, but obviously you're going to be going into this office environment. Is there any kind of like things that you'll give advice to in terms of, here's like personality wise, like I always also tell my students, and obviously it's going to be different for the more mature or the more mature positions,
Okay.
but I try to get my students to say, hey, try to have a non-accounting conversation, because it's like everybody knows about accounting. Yeah. That's not really the issue. Really what the issue is like, how are you going to get along with these people personally, because they're going to be working
100%.
with them.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
100%. I mean, so when you have an interview, the company has already seen your resume. So on paper, they know that you could do the job. But how are you going to stand out compared to your competition? And it's like you said, it's your personality, it's the rapport that you build. I always say chemistry leads to offers. It's really simple, because if there is, Julie and Jennifer interviewing for the role, and Julie is perfect on paper and is technically strong and has 5 things out of the 6 things that a company wants, but yet Jennifer maybe has 3, but Jennifer just has the personality and the chemistry, and there was that connection. Of course, the company is going to go with Jennifer, not with Julie, right?
Right.
So I think it's very, very important, because companies see, especially in today's age, if this person is trainable, if they have the work ethics, if they have the attitude and the desire to learn and actually work hard, they will invest in that person versus somebody who doesn't have the chemistry build, but yet they have all the technical skills. Because I think we're living in a different age these days, and definitely that rapport is really, really important.
And then one of the other crazy things too is that one of my former students, she went in on an interview to an accounting firm. She didn't initially get the job. And I actually, because I knew the partner that was talking with her, I said, hey, dude, like what happened? He's all, dude, she was just like coming in like really flat. She was just like, but then I said, okay, to my student, I said, okay, you got to be positive. You got to do it. And then she got the job. She went and had another interview. It went amazing. Do
Awesome.
you, when you hear back as to why someone didn't get the job for a particular reason, will you share that with the candidate? Or how does that, is there kind of okay.
I will, absolutely. I'm probably, I am very, very direct. And I think that and I actually care. And that's why I think I've been so successful for so many years. Before the interview, if I have feedback from another company where we didn't get the job, I will absolutely share. I'll ask somebody if they're open to constructive criticism. And of course, most people say yes. And then I'll give information. Now, my delivery I may not say exactly what the company said,
right?
For many reasons, but I will absolutely prep so that we don't make the same, I don't want to say mistake, but we don't do the same thing for the next interview. My job is to make sure that every interview is successful and that I can get somebody multiple offers so that they can choose from. That's the goal. So I will do everything in my power to prepare and over prepare just to make sure somebody gets the job.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and so here's the other thing is like, if you're not using a recruiter, one of the hardest things to do is because, and I tell students this all the time, they said, Bennett, I haven't heard for like 2 or 3 weeks. And it's like, I was on that side as CFO, and it's like, I'm like Doug from the movie Up. It's like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. Right. So I'm like jumping around. Right. So, obviously the bonus about using a recruiter is you're not going to have to ask the questions about salary, about comp during the interview, because you're going to go through and handle that. It's also basically about, when can I expect for you to get back to you? And so, what's, as far as like going through and applying direct, I guess what any kind of advice for people that are going through and doing that, or is it just?
Yeah. Well, if you have experience, I would recommend not applying direct. What happens, and we kind of touched on that earlier, is that when a company posts a position, say on LinkedIn, they'll get bombarded with hundreds of resumes within 24 hours. people that are not on target for the most part, right? Seeing if they can possibly get an interview, right? And the minute you submit your resume to a company and you're in their database, my hands are tied. So say you have a position as a CFO, you post it on LinkedIn, 2 days, you're like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going through all their resumes. Let me call Deanna, she'll deliver her top 3 candidates. When I call somebody and I tell them I have a most amazing job and you're perfect for the role, and somebody says that they have already applied, my hands are tied. So,
Okay.
So there's, it's within 1 calendar year. So basically, if I have a relationship with you and I know you so well, and I can call you and I say, you need to meet this person and here's why,
Right.
and they've already applied on their own, I can't do that, right? So
Right.
my recommendation is, if you have experience, don't apply, reach out to a recruiter, somebody like myself, and see what we could do for you first. A lot of
Yeah.
people shy from doing that because they feel like, well, hey, if a company's going to use a recruiter, maybe I'm not going to get as much salary because they have to pay them a fee. It's actually the opposite. I think that's such a huge misconception. I get paid based on how much the person gets paid. So if I'm searching for a job for you and I can negotiate to get you $100,000,
Mhm.
but you're really looking for 90, of course I'm going to try to negotiate and get you more, because the more you get, the more I get. So, and companies, if they've already hired us to help them find somebody, they don't mind paying for the service. It's all what, that saying, it's what you pay for what you get what
Right.
you pay for, right? It's a kind of the same thing. So I definitely recommend go to a recruiter, see what they could do for you. There's a lot of times where I build relationships and I say, look, if you see something on LinkedIn or on Indeed, reach out to me first. Ask me if I have a relationship with this company, because if I do, you're better off going through me, because I can get you into the inbox of the hiring manager. I can pick up the phone and I can call the CFO and tell them why you're a good fit. When you apply online, you're just sitting there in database land. HR
Yeah.
may do a keyword search, so probably never get back to you. And then you just, you're upset because you don't hear back from them. So
And also, just to mention this really quickly, so you help candidates with their resumes constantly. I mean, you're going to basically, like, if there's some wording issues
yeah,
or if there's some things like, hey, Bennett, like if we're applying for the CFO of a manufacturing company, you may want to go through and highlight this, this, and this on your skills, and then send me like that kind of
absolutely.
thing. Okay. Perfect.
Absolutely. And also when we send over a resume, I don't just blast a resume and just, sit around and wait. I make the call, and we also provide little bios about the people that we work with.
Right.
So you're better off than, again, applying on your own, because somebody learns a little bit more about you, and people tend to read our emails because they hire us to do this job.
Right.
So it's just really a win-win, because of the preparation that we provide, a lot of jobs that we get that haven't hit the market yet, that we know that are coming up, or, you can call me and say, hey, Deanna, I'm thinking about hiring an accounting manager. Start gathering resumes, but I think I'm going to go full force next Monday. And then we are on top of that, right? So we're able to give you the information that's not out on the market.
Awesome. Okay, now here is for everybody who's watching, this is obviously the big question of today is, when do we go through and leave public accounting, right? And I can tell you for myself, I was about to leave. I wanted to quit Coopers and Lybrand after 1 year. Back when I was doing it, it was a 2-year requirement. Thank God, it was Merle Hopkins, who's at USC, pulled me aside. And he was one of my CPA review professors through the Doberman CPA review, which was a very long time ago. He pulled me aside and he said, Bennett, you've got to stay for 2 years, because that's what you needed at that time to become licensed. Obviously now, very, very different landscape, because you really only need that year of experience. But let's just kind of talk about, like, what are employers looking for in candidates for positions? Obviously, you can't understate the importance of having your license, correct?
Yeah, no, that's definitely important. I would say get into public accounting to leave public accounting. Don't overstay your welcome. A lot of people who join public accounting, all they know is just that. So say you joined PwC and you're with a company and you're there 1 year, 2 years, and Everyone's telling you to stick around, to become a supervisor, to become a manager. I believe that is, unless you decide that you want to go on partner track, which is so far off, I believe the best time to leave public accounting would be the 2 to 3 year mark.
By the
No
way,
more.
how long does it now take to, and I know you may or may not know the answer to this, but I know that when I was going through, one of my friends who was an intern with me,
Mhm.
I think he made partner in about 10 years, which I think is kind of rare. But if
Right,
you're going into big four, making partner, and I think there's also just too, like a ton of uncertainty,
right,
right? Because like EY got that huge fine. I mean, you see all this difference, like KPMG got, like all the firms have their different issues,
yeah,
but it's like, oh, well, we can't make, and I've even heard like senior managers tell me, oh, yeah, they were, and this is at a smaller firm, they said, oh, yeah, they keep on delaying them because it's like these partners are trying to get cash out of you because you got to buy into the partnership.
right.
How long does it typically take from what you've seen at Big Four to make partner?
I don't know the exact years, to be frank. I definitely know that it's over 10 years for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
And what I do know that's a huge, I think, misconception is when you actually become partner, you don't really do auditing or tax or consulting. It's more of
No.
a sales business development
Oh,
role.
you're
It's
absolutely
very
doing business
different,
development. Oh, yeah. No,
right?
there's no more
But
technical stuff. And that's, it all comes down to what are your sales skills like? And I would even say too that if you're in public accounting after year 3, you have to go start developing your book of business. You have to go out there and start doing business development, because if you don't do that, it's going to take it's going to be crazy. So for
right,
those of you who are watching that are at, I think that the more you talk with people about, when do you become partner, I think it's really important to do it. By the way, I had an accounting firm partner who once said to me, he said, "Hey, Bennett, this first year associate said, well, when do I become partner?" And he was really offended by it. But I told him, I go, no, you got to tell him, this person, like, well, if you bring me $3 million worth of business, we'll talk.
right.
That's kind of what it is. So,
Yeah.
um,
Most
and
people, yeah, I mean, there, of course, there's partners of all CPA firms and Big Four. Most people, though, leave way before that. And if
yeah,
you should, there's a lot of misconception that you should stay till manager. Actually, when you hit manager and anything above, it's so much harder for somebody to find a job in the private sector, because the folks that have started with you in your same star group, they're already in private. So they're working for a Disney or any other company, right? I don't know why I keep on saying Disney today, but or any other, I'm not a fan, but but any other company, they're what we call combos. And what that means is that you have a combination of public accounting and private industry. So when they go apply for a manager role, and they have somebody like you who's stuck around in public and you're a manager and you're applying for the same role, the person with public and private is so much more marketable
right,
because they have the best of both worlds than
right.
somebody straight out of public. So your competition becomes so much higher. So that's why I keep on saying your ideal spot, 2 to 3 years, 2 to 4 years. It's not too soon. It's actually the perfect time. And there are so many positions that I'm working even at right now that are seeking folks with those amount of years of experience, because at that time, you're still what companies think are very trainable, eager to learn, motivated. So I would say that would be the best time to leave.
Awesome. Okay. So,
Yeah.
and as far as like, so this is another thing too, is like when I tell students that it's like when you're selecting an accounting firm, you always want to go where it's going to be the best fit for you
Right.
personally. Right. So when you're looking at candidates, do employers say, well, I want somebody from Deloitte, or I want someone who's Big Four, or if they come from like Grant Thornton, RSM, and then I guess going down to like the real, like a lot of more like the smaller firms, do you notice? I mean, is because obviously like my personal opinion is that if someone's coming from a real small firm, they're actually probably getting a lot better experience because they've been exposed to a lot more things. But what do you see from the employer side in terms of where they came from in public accounting?
I can see the way you're thinking about that, and that kind
Right.
of makes absolute sense.
Mhm.
We do see a huge preference for Big Four,
Right.
night and day. I'm working on a couple positions right now. They won't see anyone from a regional firm, from a national firm, just Big Four. It's either EY, PwC, KPMG, right? Or, but definitely not the smaller firms. So if I was giving somebody advice who has an option to go from, to a BDO or a Grant or an Ernst & Young, I would choose Ernst & Young.
Right. And so would you say, though, is it to the extent that obviously with big four firms, like something like 85 or 90% leave within the first 3 years, right? Which actually creates openings. So would you say it would behoove someone who, say, as at like a BDO, should they transfer to big four for a couple months? Or would you say that no, is that like, what would you say on that front?
So if somebody decided to go to BDO as a start of their career, I don't think it would be smart to go do a big four. I would just stick it out. I mean, BDO is still a great company, right? It's certainly not big four, but it's a solid, well, reputable company.
Right.
I do not think that there would be a point to go into the big four to waste a couple more years where you can already transition into private.
Right.
So I would say no.
Yeah. Okay.
Once you start in public accounting, I don't think that there's a point to go to another CPA firm.
Right.
Just try to, if you're not going to go partner track, and hopefully you don't, try to get out and go into the private sector from whatever firm you're at. It may take you a little bit longer, but it still will happen. So just there's a huge preference and demand for big four versus, of course, smaller size companies.
But obviously, if you are at a smaller size company, then having the CPA license is absolutely critical. I mean, like to as far as like to staying with it. Okay.
Yeah, it's important. It's rare that, I mean, if you don't have a CPA or you're not working towards a CPA, a company may ask you, okay, what's your plans? Like, is that in your future? Have you just been busy? And if the answer is yes, it's in my future, I think that's okay. But yeah, of course, the more you have after your name, the better, especially if it's a CPA.
Right. Cool. And then are there, like, as far as like the types of clients that somebody works on while they're, and again, like if you're working in a big four and you're working on insurance companies or on financial services, you only work on those clients because the accounting is like so specific. Right. And when you're placing those candidates, is it better that, would you want to be in those industries, or are you better off being more of like a generalist?
You're asking so many on-point great questions. I'm impressed.
Well, no, Deanna, this is all I do. Like, you have to understand something. Like, Deanna, like I've been waiting for this conversation because it's like, honestly, it's like, no, because I get this, like when I'm advising students, this is the stuff we're talking about. And it's like, and this is really when my students tell me like, well, Bennett, I'm going to go work at PwC in tax. I'm like, I don't know, like, and again, like that's, I mean, and that's actually, well, actually, let's do this question first.
So to answer your question, yes, it makes a difference. So I would recommend staying away from non-for-profit and government companies and clients. Sometimes you may not have a choice, frankly, right? Whatever you're staffed on is whatever you're staffed on. But if I had a choice, or if I would make a suggestion, stay away from non-for-profit, stay away from government, get something exciting like tech companies, any company that perhaps went through an IPO. Those are all very marketable points that you can put on the resume. Anything with, publicly traded companies, so you can put 10K, 10Q on your resume, SEC. That's more exciting and more appealing and more transferable, right? The technical stuff versus doing gas accounting versus GAAP accounting, right? It's gas, right? It's government. So it's, what is it? Generally accepted accounting standards, right? Versus,
well, I mean, it's like, look, I think for government that you can actually make a lot of money doing governmental accounting. And like for my school district, there's a position that's open right now. I think it's paying like 150 or something crazy. And it's like, obviously government offers like the pension, really good benefits, those kinds of things, but it's a very different working environment.
Slower growing pace.
Yes.
I feel like people who join, for example, the Big Four or any public accounting, stay away from that unless you're kind of at your retirement age. Maybe when you put in the work, and then decide where you want to be. But Definitely financial services is great. Real estate is great. Entertainment, especially in LA, is fantastic. Right. Any public accounting for, I'm sorry, any publicly traded companies versus
Right.
government. There's also, what is it? Benefit. I think there's a lot of like benefit clients, or I don't.
There's all those doing the 401k audits. I mean,
Yeah,
there's all
not
those.
super.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not something that if you had a choice, I would stay away from that.
Right.
Um,
So like the things that are like they call it now like risk advisory, where you're doing
yeah,
Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, like those types of things, you'd rather just do audit, right? Because at audit, you'll tend to get a better generalist experience. It's not
100%.
necessarily the end of the world if you're doing advisory, but general. Okay. And then, so here's a big question. So if I start in tax at a big four firm, how hard is it for me to go through and then transition into like a financial reporting role or into like, so if I'm in tax, what does my career path look like?
I love that question. Your career path looks like tax.
Okay.
So it's really, really tough to get out from a tax capacity into something non-tax related, into financial reporting, general ledger, internal audit. You're
Right.
usually right. People want people with that experience. So if you start a big four and taxes the way you went, that's your path.
Right.
If you start a big four and you did consulting or audit, audit would be kind of the one that has the most meat, the bread and butter, where you can go into financial reporting, into general
Sure.
ledger. Once in a while, like I have a couple of positions right now, very rare. And that's why I'm a recruiter now, not in finance, is because I have a few positions for auditors, big four auditors, to get into do pure finance work.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's super, super rare. And when I was working at Arthur Andersen many, many moons ago, and Enron happened and we were part of the layoffs, unfortunately. Well, fortunately for me, because I think I can't see myself doing anything else but recruiting, right? But, unfortunately for a lot of thousands and thousands of people, um, you couldn't find a finance job.
Right.
So, and now there's that opportunity. So if I had to choose a path, or my professional recommendation would be try to stick to just assurance auditing, because
Right.
there's more opportunities in more different venues that
Right.
you can then land
Right.
versus just sticking around in tax or other sectors of the business.
By the way, just to kind of, and just for those of you that are in tax, it's not the end of the world. In fact, if
Right.
you're doing tax, you're going to make the most amount of money in public accounting, because when you are like, when you're an auditor, you're independent. But when you're a tax person, you're basically their advisor, you're the helper, right? And the clients love the helper, right? You're
Right.
helping them basically save money. And so those clients will stay with you. And, when my former people that I know, like you can make a lot of money in tax.
Absolutely.
So
Yes,
it's,
tax is great.
yeah,
Absolutely. Tax is fantastic. And um but you just have to love tax for
yeah,
kind of commit to tax, right? For
exactly.
the rest of your career. And there are of course exceptions to the rule and people do make changes. But if you to ask me, I'm very direct, as you could tell, I would say, the audit practice, the assurance practice is the route to go. But there's so many successful, talented tax professionals.
Right.
Absolutely. So
And then in terms of like, like as far as like the skills that you see, obviously 10K, 10Q work, obviously a huge plus. Doing the IPO stuff, because that is a very specialized thing for
right.
those of us who've been through it, which is crazy. Like what other types of skills are employers looking for? Really good Excel, obviously interpersonal skills to help lead the organization to their next level. Are there any other types of specific skill sets that employers want that you see that are out there?
Yeah, I would say, obviously good schools, good GPAs, and believe it or not, yes, if somebody has been out of school for a couple of years, but they had a pretty high GPA, I'd like to include that on their resume.
Okay.
So the client sees
Wow.
that. Yeah, I do. I know a lot of people don't, but for me, professionally, personally, if it's 3.5 and above, I want it on there
Okay.
because it speaks to somebody's work ethic and right, professionalism and so forth. But if you're working on your CPA, we talked about that. If perhaps you decided to get your master's in tax, or you're working on your, what else?
Masters in data
Mas-
analytics.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people also feel like the CFA route, CIA possibly if you want to do internal audit.
Mhm.
But for the most part, I think CPA is really the priority for most companies.
Right.
And also stability. It's a really, really big thing. When I first started my career, and I'm sure you could attest to that, stability was like, if somebody's been with a company for 10 years, that's called a stable person. These days, right, as long as you've been with a company for 2 years, 2.5, like that's that's solid. So just, wherever your career takes you, just make sure that you don't have a job every year, every 6 months.
Right.
If you also are in college and you're debating to have an internship at the Big Four, do the internship, because that's huge. That's a huge resume builder, that you were an intern at the company and then they decided to hire you full time. I think it
Right.
tells the story. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like for myself, because I had so many, like I've been at Irvine Valley now for 10 years, which is like, it's actually, you're still ahead of me in terms of being at the Century Group. So I've got a while to go. But it's like one of the, like when I really struggled with that, because I was jumping jobs constantly and I had to leave things off of my resume because I would sometimes take jobs. And again, my bad for not having someone like yourself going through and helping me through that process of saying, okay, are these employers reputable? If they're hiring a recruiter, it means that they have those resources and that, that's something that they value. So, and by the way, yeah, just to the end of your point, if somebody is, if you're presenting a candidate and they're jumping around like that, that's going to be a tougher sell because they're making that investment in the employee.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if someone's just going to be here for 6 months and then leave, that's tough.
Right.
I mean, exactly. And obviously, but there's might be life circumstances that you can't change, but that's a tough one.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
And we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but like in terms of getting the most out of public accounting, it's really like, obviously the more things that you have, like working on IPOs, doing audit, all those kinds of things can really help build that resume.
Yeah, huge, especially if it's, companies that somebody have heard of. And don't be afraid to put the clients on your resume. You're not, it's not illegal. You could absolutely put it, or you could tell the recruiter like, hey, like my biggest client is, CB Richard Ellis or Snapchat, because that makes your background even more marketable. And you could talk about that. I think there may be, you can't disclose if you're a partner.
No, it's actually this can help you out. So if you go to PCAOB, which is the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, so if I'm working in the Irvine office, or if I'm working in the Los Angeles office of PricewaterhouseCoopers, I can say, oh, I worked on Disney. And if I go to PCAOB, they'll basically say, oh, the auditor of Disney is PwC Los Angeles. So you can say, I would probably not do it if it was tax or consulting, because then it's not going to be as public. But I think if you're disclosing to, if you're saying it on an interview, as long as you're not saying like, well, this company is going to have a huge restatement next week, so it might be a good time to sell, right? It's we don't want to say those things because we're going to end up with Martha Stewart and the shackles.
We don't want that.
We don't want to go. We do not want to commit a federal crime because we will do the time, state crime party time. Like Newsom will let us out tomorrow. Okay.
Right. But it's okay to put the companies on the resume as long as you feel comfortable, I guess. Yeah.
And then so we've kind of already talked about this, about when to leave after 10 days or 10 years. And obviously we talked about the diminishing returns, right? So if you stayed a manager, you've got that public-private mix. And so here's a great question. When do you start to look? When should you start? If I'm working at a Big Four firm, when should I start looking?
I would say 2 years or 2 busy seasons, usually 2 years. If somebody comes to me, and there are a lot of people that have less than that, at times public accounting is just not for you.
Yep.
You expect it to be one thing, and then it's completely the opposite. My case, exactly. I interned at Arthur Andersen. I started full-time, and it just wasn't my cup of tea. And I don't know if it was the clients that I was on or the managers I had, but frankly, I hated it, like
Yeah.
hated it. So that it was like after 10 days, I wanted to quit, but I stuck around. But to answer your question, I do believe that if you're there for 2 years, you're golden. Okay.
Right.
You don't have to wait till 3 years. I also would recommend doing it before you're a manager or a senior manager, right? Exactly what we talked about. The longer you stay, the harder it is to get out, not the opposite. So a lot of people believe that, hey, if I'm a manager or a senior manager, I'll make more money and I can demand more money.
Right.
But again, at that time, when you're there, when you're just have public accounting and somebody has both public and private, you're going to get beat out all the time because the company is going to want to hire somebody who has best of public, both the public and private sector. And I think the biggest jump that you can demand in terms of compensation as well is kind of at your 2-3 year mark.
Right. And
So
then, yeah, it's kind of, God, what was I going to say? And by the way, too, like we were talking last year, and I'll never forget this conversation. I said, Deanna, have you ever seen a job market like this? And this is about a year, maybe a little bit more than a year ago. And this is we're right now in October 2023, October 2022. I mean, the market was insane. I have never seen, and I don't think you had either, like in 30 years, it was like, because there still is such a huge shortage of CPAs.
100%.
Huge shortage.
I think this is a great career to be in. I think there's
Yeah.
always a need for an accountant, a tax professional, right? Companies can't survive without them. So, who's ever watching this, good job and, making a good decision, because there's always a need. When the world kind of stopped and the pandemic hit, I thought my career was over, frankly, but it took the opposite turn. And you're right. Last year was the best year ever because there was such a shortage. And I mean, companies were fighting for candidates. The money, the salary increases were just outrageous. I there were times where somebody came to me, and I still remember this, and I have a couple of stories, but there was this one girl, and she said, Deanna, and she had like a year and a half, and she says, Deanna, I'm looking for this dollar amount on base, not a penny less. And I said, look, I'd love to get you that, but you're not really realistic. And I want to make sure that we're on the same page because we're partners in crime here. So I want to,
Sure.
get you the most, but it's not going to happen. Sure enough, without even me having to negotiate, I got her more than she ever asked for. And I told her she can't, like, it's not going to happen. And that was the whole motto of last year.
Right.
I mean, and it was a win-win, for a lot of people. I think companies are now simmering down a little bit, even though it's really hard to find good talent. I mean, really. So they're still paying above market. It's kind of like the real estate market, right? Like, remember what was happening last year compared to this year, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But yeah, there's always a demand, and the market's still very active and still hot. Yeah, last year was absolutely insane.
And by the way, I covered this on one of my earlier videos, but obviously, like, what is suffering within the big four firms is that you do hear about, like, some of the big four firms are doing layoffs, but they tend to not be in audit or tax. It's in the other services, like the consulting, because if there's no work, they don't need those professionals. And you also have to kind of, this is something that's really important as a candidate, is that if you say, oh my God, if I leave the big four firm or I leave this accounting firm, everything's going to end. It's going to be Carmageddon, Armageddon. It's all going to blow up. It's not. Because guess what? If they want to get rid of you because of a slowdown, or they want to boost up their partner's pocket, they're going to terminate you in 3 seconds flat.
100%.
They're gonna show you the door. So never ever feel guilty. Now, obviously, you don't want to burn bridges. We do want to give 2 weeks notice. We want to make sure that they're taken care of, because we want to do our thoughtful things as CPAs, because we are CPAs. But do not ever feel guilty about leaving a firm.
Never feel guilty. They've survived without you before. They will survive after you. And also, food for thought. Say you're not sure, there are creatures of habit. Like, look at me. I've been with one company for 13 years, right? So I'm not one to give advice, but what I do is a little bit different than, the people I place. So if you're not ready to leave, or if you're scared or worried, or you're not sure what's to come, the cool part about working for public accounting is that they will always have you back. If it's not the same company, it will be any other company. You will get multiple offers with every single CPA firm that you apply to. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And they're going to give you a lot of money because you have that experience. So most people never go back, right? Never turn around. They never change their mind. But for the very unique few, you can come back, within seconds, and everyone will have you with open arms.
And this might be a topic for like later on, but as far as like, are there like, as far as like going through and doing like career building, right? Is that, do you tell, like when you're talking to someone who's maybe like out for 2 years, it's like, hey, what's your objective? Like, do you want to be a chief financial officer? Like, what are you looking to ultimately do? But like, what advice do you give people, like to say like, oh, I want to be like, do you say, okay, I want to basically be a CFO in 5 or 6 years? And then do you kind of work backwards, or what type of advice do you give to people? Like, should you be targeting for like a larger position so that when you're choosing your current one, you're on the right track? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say don't have a specialty per se. So if were in public, for example, and you only had entertainment clients and you go into entertainment, that's okay, but maybe reconsider your next move, because you don't want to be that entertainment person that can only get a job within entertainment. So I don't know if that was your question.
Yeah.
In terms of, who do you want to be when you grow up type of question, try to do as broad of a position as possible, because that you could take anywhere versus having a specialty, such
Right.
as, for example, internal audit, right? That's kind of like if you get out of public and you continue an internal audit, and there's nothing wrong with that, but just be mindful that when you're going to want to leave that role and look for the next job, you may be considering more internal audit positions than general ledger or controllership. So my recommendation, if you kind of want to have things open because you're not sure which route you want to take, then go into more of a general role. Financial reporting is great. General ledger is great. Finance possibly may be great, but I would say the general ledger, corporate accounting,
Right.
is the route to go, because then there's different, you can go left, you can go right. There's more doors and opportunities available to you.
Right. And I think this is also too, like with, if you are a CPA, you can really kind of remake yourself into pretty much just about anything you want, because it's such a desired skill set. But obviously landing like that particular job can sometimes be a little bit more tricky.
Yeah.
So I've just kind of like listed out here is that, like where if you're in public accounting, the types of roles you can immediately transfer into, which are kind of like no-brainer, like internal audit, financial planning and analysis, financial analyst. I'm not sure what the difference is between 2 and 3, but I just wrote them up there. Inventory accounting manager, senior accountant, staff accountant. Are there other types of roles that you can kind of go into from, basically going out of public accounting into one of these roles? Are there other things that you were seeing, like I think you may have mentioned before, like you saw like this opportunity basically for financial managers if they have like a lot more experience? What have you seen on that front?
Yeah, I mean, the general progression, frankly, would be a senior accountant. So let's assume we're talking about a person who's been with the company for 2 to 4 years, right?
Okay.
Within public. So general progression would most likely be a senior accountant. It could be a senior corporate accountant. I'm working on a position that's the title is senior financial analyst, financial reporting. So it's a little bit of combination, but mostly it's general ledger and financial reporting. I think that's great to do. That's very marketable. And that's, one other reason, and a little bit kind of to backtrack, you want to do things to build your resume always. And when you make a decision, you have to ask, how will this benefit me? How will this make me more marketable? Will this, increase? Because frankly, marketability equals dollars, right? So the more marketable you are, the more money you're going to make.
Right.
And I would encourage folks to get into the corporate accounting, senior accountant, or financial reporting. Most of the people that I talk to out of public, they don't want to do anything with audit. There are they're like, no audit, thank you. I'm even scared to ask at times, but there are a lot of great audit positions where you get the opportunity to travel and some you don't. Very rarely, like we mentioned, finance. There are finance positions, but that doesn't happen that often. So,
Right.
what else is there? You mentioned inventory, not as
Yeah.
appealing to us.
Not in California.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. So, but yeah, usually those are the positions you want to target: senior accountant, senior financial reporting, just really general ledger. The more general it is, the better it is for the future, because you can decide what route you want to take.
Okay, awesome. And I think we've kind of talked about so the roles that can take a little bit longer is going to be it's going to be the controller role, the chief financial officer role.
You will never go from public accounting to a CFO ever, because you don't have that experience.
Yeah, the only one I've seen do it was a partner, but I don't think that ended up working out, because this was many years ago. Somebody who went out of Coopers and Lybrand, or I think he may have gone at PwC, but he transitioned to be a CFO, and that usually does not work.
Right. It's a really tough transition, right?
It is. It's hard. I mean, I think as a partner at a firm, you get to kind of see the obviously the audit is a huge part of what the CFO is responsible for. However, there's all the internal stuff, all the internal financial things. And I think as a partner, you have it much easier, because you're focusing on the development instead of the day-to-day accounting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, most of the time, if I have a and a lot of partners are usually kind of set where they are, but if there is a senior manager or partner that reaches out, it's really tough to find something. If you're a manager, for example, right now I have such a great company I'm working with. It's a household name. It's a place where I go to multiple times a week, and I'm so excited to find them the right person. But they're looking.
By the way, everybody, so right now, this is October 2023. Yeah. Deanna has stuff literally, if you follow her on LinkedIn, she is posting stuff up all the time. So if this position is no longer available, there's going to be one a few weeks from now. So
100%.
just keep that in mind.
Yes. And we actually, as a company, because I do believe we dominate LA, and we are probably we are the best company. And we have a lot of talented recruiters, right? So we always have new opportunities, multiple opportunities a day. But this one particular one is looking to hire a senior accounting manager. And the client wants somebody, either a manager or senior manager out of public, wearing Big Four, right? No surprise. Or somebody who's been in public and has been in the private sector for 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
So that would be a good position. There are a few, I'm just trying to think, if you're a manager out of public, where do you go? So you can get a senior manager accounting position. You can get an accounting manager position. You can possibly, if it's a larger company, maybe get a supervisor role, but most of the time it's manager and above. Right. So not to say that there's nothing available at that level, sure is, but it just may take a little bit longer, because there's less available opportunities for somebody that doesn't have both the public and private sector.
And just kind of jumping around, and we've talked a little bit about these different topics, but as far as when I'm advising people in terms of, okay, how do you go through and do your diligence? I have a few different videos on this about let's take a look at Glassdoor. May not be completely accurate. It's kind of like rate my professors. It's whatever. If somebody gets fired, of course, they're going to leave derogatory comments,
right?
Or they get a bad grade. They're going to basically say, "Oh yeah, Tchaikovsky's an idiot." You look at, I've had students say "Do you suck as a professor?" That was hilarious.
Oh.
Yeah. And then no, it's good, because then I say, "Well, have you seen the movie Gladiator?" And this was in 2013, so it was more recent than now. And she said, "Yeah, I did." I go, "If I suck, go like this. Give me a big thumbs down." In the middle of a class, everybody's laughing. It's come on. So when you're, and I think this is really what a lot of people don't really realize, is that when you go to a private company, you're going to be at one place. the companies are going to pay for parking. Usually parking is always going to be provided.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have to worry about chargeability in terms of like on a client. Now, what I would say though, is you do have to make sure that your work gets done and you want to stay on top of the work. But as long as you're getting your work done, I think your seniors are going to be happy. You are also going to be working with the same controller, CFO, like every day. And obviously you have a company culture. What kind of things have you heard from your professionals, like once they kind of started, like when they leave public accounting and they go to a regular company? What have you kind of seen, like any kind of challenges is that they've had, or like what types of, how do they ease that transition?
Sure. I think that's a great question. I think, of course, public accounting and the private sector is really different. So it's an adjustment. And usually it's a huge learning curve, but everyone's able to do it, right? And it usually takes about 6 months or so. So if you have moments of frustration or challenges, ask your boss, ask your colleagues for help, because it's true. This, you know, in public accounting, you have clients and different engagements, and you see just a small picture of their financial statements. Here, it's your baby. You see it from beginning to end, hopefully. To answer your question in terms of Glassdoor, may not be popular opinion, but frankly, in my 20 years as a recruiter, I've probably been on Glassdoor twice.
Okay.
It's
Wow.
it's to your point, you know, people don't go to Glassdoor, people don't go to Yelp to write positive things. Like that's just not humanity these days, right? We
Right.
only go there to bitch about something.
Exactly.
When something's wrong, where we're not happy. So I think you got to go with the gut. I think you have to go, you know, do you have good feelings, or, you know, were the vibes good? Did you like the culture when you showed up to the interview or when you had a virtual chat with the company? Sure, do your due diligence, do your research, look out LinkedIn, go to their website, see if there's any news about the company, but don't solely rely on Glassdoor, because it's not always accurate. And most of the time, it's only people who have something negative to say go on.
Right.
Right.
And by the way, too, like, don't be creepy. Like if you're going onto someone's like Facebook page and said, "Oh, I saw you were at Starbucks at 4 o'clock yesterday enjoying that macchiato." It's like, really, Bennett? Like, what are you doing, dude? That's not like diligence. Like, that's like bizarre.
Right. We
But
have too many resources available to us. But yeah, I mean, look, go with your gut is my recommendation. Talk to people about different companies. And in the beginning, you know, as you're settling in, just know that it's an adjustment period, because there are different systems a company use that you've never touched on, different methods to the madness, right? So just be prepared to learn. Just like when you start public accounting, you're prepared to learn.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Now here's the fun part, last part
Yeah.
of our, so I've hopefully have saved a little bit of time here at the very end, because I know you have to have some of the hilarious stories about different like different things, or what types of things, or like what type of anecdotes, or like in your 20 years of recruiting, like what are some of the different things you've kind of seen, or like what do you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah.
Just like, yeah.
I was driving into the office today and I was thinking about this, because you know, in 20 years, I work with people, right? There are so many different personalities and ways of doing things. And not only am I representing the candidates, but I'm also representing the clients and bringing two people together. So you would think I would have so many stories, but funny stories. Let's talk about success.
Okay.
So maybe that's a little bit easier. Throughout my career, I feel like what sets me apart, frankly, from a lot of other recruiters, it's not just a transaction for me. Like,
Right.
I'm not going to help you find a job and we'll never talk. You know, unfortunately, the people that work with me don't get rid of me for a very, very long time. And
We've been talking for over 10 years. I don't think it's
right,
ever going
exactly, point made. And so I have people who I have had the pleasure, and it truly brings it's music to my ears when I land them, not their first job, not their second job, but start out as a senior accountant, find their next job as a manager, and then a senior manager, and see them grow like
Right.
that. Like, even talking about it gives me goosebumps right now, because that me, that's a big deal. I don't
Right.
see myself as a recruiter. I see myself as a career coach, as a
Yeah.
mentor, right? Because I know the ins and outs of a lot of companies and things that a lot of people don't, right? Because
Yeah.
that's my line of business. I work, I live and breathe this, right? And just most recently, actually last week, I had a CFO that I've been working with for over 15 years. He is amazing. I love him. And I've placed every single one of his positions. He won't use
Wow.
anyone else but me. Yes, he's great. And I'm on the phone with him literally, and I kid you not, this happened 2 weeks ago. I'm on the phone with him and he says, you know what, Deanna, I don't think I want to hire this finance person. I think I want to now look for a senior accountant. I've kind of thought, our org chart through, and the senior accountant
Mhm.
route is the way I want to go. As we're talking, somebody who I have known for a very long time, placed her twice before,
Mhm.
emails me her resume, sends me a text, Deanna, I just sent you my resume. I'm interested in looking. I live in Manhattan Beach. And I'm seeing this and I'm talking to the CFO and I said, oh my God, do I have the perfect person for you? So this happens live.
Yeah.
And because I've known this person for so many years, I said to the CFO, you're going to love her. She is exactly what you need.
Mhm.
Sure enough, I get off the phone with him. I call her and I tell her this. I said, I'm not a religious person. I'm not spiritual, but I do believe things happen for a
Sure.
reason. And I told the CFO about you. I hope I didn't overstep, but I think you will love him.
Mhm.
I set up an interview. Guess who starts work next Thursday there?
Wow.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Like, talk about a success story. She didn't have to interview anywhere else but this one company.
That's awesome.
Like, what is like that solidifies why I do what I do, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm able now, had she not reached out to me and had she been applying, she'd still be looking for a job.
Right.
So 110%. So that was just the most recent success story. Some other success stories are, kind of to your point. I tell somebody about a job, they go on Glassdoor, they may see not all like great reviews. They say, I'm not interested, Deanna. I don't want to send over my resume for consideration. And because I know so much about different companies and their culture and their people, I say, I can't take no for an answer. Let me tell you about them a little bit more. And look, and if you interview there and you don't love it,
Right.
you can always pass, but give yourself the opportunity to be open-minded. And I think that's
Sure.
a really good lesson too. Like, whoever's looking for a job, have an open mind, because on paper, it may not always be what it is, and vice versa, right? It may be better, it may be worse, who knows? So to have an open mind, be open to interviewing and learning more, and just, you can always say no, right? But you can never go backwards. So anyways, so I convinced this gal to do the interview, and sure enough, she ended up working at the company. So the moral of the story is, working with a recruiter, there's so many things that we know internally, have working with relationships with companies and stuff, that we can share with you besides what you see online.
Right.
And there are so many success stories like that that just bring me joy. I have another gal that I always actually think about too. I helped her find a job about 10 years ago. She's still at the same company. She's had 3 kids working there. She loves it. I mean, that's not super relevant, but she's really
Wow.
like enjoyed her stay. And I've called her and I say, hey, like, it's time to look. Like, this is like, you can't stay there for much. She's like, no, Deanna, I'm good. And I'm like, no, you have. So
No, it's really hard because like when I talk to my students, it's like, and obviously if they have kids, like that's their number one priority.
right.
Right. And I think that if you have kids and and I think employers actually like this too, because you're not going to be like me in my 20s. I was a disaster. I was like worse than a dumpster fire. I mean, I think what ends up happening though is it's like if you like if you're it's not a question of being settled, but it's like, oh, it's not even a routine. It's like I've got life things happening around that are really important. So
Right.
having that job where I can go in and focus, get my work done, and yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's yeah,
And that's also, I mean, I feel like, I love what I do. I love helping people. I get, again, for me, it's not transactions, it's relationships. And that's,
yeah,
I think I am where I am today. And I just, I sleep so well at night knowing that I do good for folks. And there are people, I had somebody maybe 2 years ago send me a note on LinkedIn, and I think posted it because you don't get this appreciation that often.
Right.
This gentleman said, Deanna, I just want you to know that like I owe you, I don't remember his words exactly, but he's like, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have landed this job and I
That's
wouldn't
awesome.
have been able to support my family the way I am. So like there's a lot of like success stories, and I appreciate people sharing because a lot of people don't, they think that recruiters are just there to make a quick buck, and sure there are maybe a few, but not the case in,
No,
not
and
the case
and
in.
I think like, look, when we've spoken over the years, I mean, it's like that's so much of what you do, and this is really it's the counseling part of it. And I think even if you place someone at a job, and the fact that you're reaching out to them, like, a
Always.
year or two
Yeah.
later, like, the client may not like that, but it's okay. But it's like everybody, it's like, but you have to really look out what's best for your candidates. And so, like, are there any topics that we didn't talk about today that like are going through candidates' minds, like once they've kind of been transitioned over? Like, what are the next, like, is there anything that we're kind of missing from our conversation from here today? Or like, is there any other advice or words of wisdom you can share?
I don't think, I mean, again, about recruiting, I could talk for hours,
Yeah.
right? There's so much information. I would definitely recommend to those that have never used a recruiter, don't shy away from that. It costs you nothing. When I was at Arthur Andersen, recruiters would call me, I would literally delete their messages and say, I can't talk to you, right? Only if I knew how valuable, like it said, it's so random how I ended up being where I am, right? Because I used to dismiss recruiters, but use a service, and nothing is free in life anymore, right? So it's kind of odd when you tell somebody that I'm going to help you out for free, like people, they're like, okay, what's the catch, right? But there's no catch. We're just the middle person, just like a realtor, just like a matchmaker.
Yeah.
I would just say professionalism is key. Commit to self-development, commit to keeping your word in terms of, if you say yes to an interview, follow through. You can always say no later on. And just, enjoy kind
Oh,
of the learning.
but by the way, be on time.
Yeah.
Don't like don't show up like who is like John Fetterman, that's senator from New Jersey, in a hoodie, shorts, and sandals, right? They had to change the dress code in the Senate for him. But like, look, I mean, you want to be dressing professionally. Obviously,
Yes.
you don't want to be in a suit and tie, if that's, but you want to be like business casual at least.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Times have changed, right? Drastically. So usually the first interviews happen via Zoom. Okay. And talking about is like a strange story too. I just interviewed somebody and we did a Zoom, and the person had like an unmade bed behind them. And I'm like, who would hire this person? Like, I hope this is not like, if you're not if you're not ashamed to like go online with me, like having that and like a dog running around and barking, then God forbid, like, what are you going to do in an interview, right?
Right.
Be professional. Not everything goes these days. I think we live in a world where everything goes, and that's not true. Especially when you're interviewing necessarily. So just know that people are mindful of your surroundings when you do the interview. Um, and you have to look good. You have one, time to make an impression. And to this
Right.
day, and a lot of people won't say this, and I know you kind of even said like, don't wear a suit. I say go full force.
Okay.
Be awkward, if you, well, and know your audience too. If it's an entertainment company, for example, maybe a nice business casual dress,
Right.
right? But if it's, a law firm, for example, or a real estate company, then show up, look good, like it's your wedding day, dress to impress, right?
Tuxedo. Wow.
Oh no, not tuxedo, I guess. But I mean, like, brush your hair. And it's funny, oddly enough, I do have to say these things once in a while, right? Sit up straight, be mindful of your surroundings, because people do watch that. Another story, actually, this is a perfect segue. So I had somebody that I've known for years, and he had a final interview through a client of mine. And we were both so excited. The company was excited. He was excited. And I was like, yes, like we're going to do it. It was a final interview. It was more so like, let's just check out the boxes and then we're going to make them an offer. So they're done with their interview. The client calls me. I'm like, hi, how did it go? You know, super excited, thinking I'm going to get an offer. And they're like, Deanna, it didn't go well at all. And I said, what do you mean? And they're like, it was so weird. He was so distracted. He was either like texting or, you know, doing emails on the side. He kept on looking down and we're just in shock. Like, why would he even talk to us if he was so busy? And I was like, this does not sound like this person. So I called him and I said, what in the world happened? He's like, what are you talking about? And this is a virtual, like, right? Like you and I are doing right now. And I gave him the feedback. He said, Deanna, I was just writing down notes as they were talking. So he's sitting there and
Oh,
can you imagine? He has his piece of paper. He's sitting there looking down, writing down notes, but they think that
but he was text. Okay, yeah, that's a great thing. Put the phone away, get out a piece of paper, and if you need to take notes,
yes.
right?
And if you're taking notes and you're doing a virtual interview, let the party on the other side know
Yeah,
that you're about to take notes. So, Bennett, I'm
yeah,
sorry, I'm just writing this down so you know
right.
that I'm looking down for that reason. So that's kind of a story that I often share, right?
Yeah.
Because, and that goes to like know your audience and be mindful of your surroundings because things like this happen, especially in a virtual environment that we're in right now.
By the
So,
way, like, so this is like one of the biggest faux pas I made was when I started in public accounting. I went to a restaurant and I squeezed a lemon without cutting it, and I nailed the in charge in the eye. And okay, so I've like, so do you recommend like some sort of like etiquette training or like in terms of eating meals, or is it just, and I know that might sound like really basic, but
yeah.
I think though, like, have you had any of those kind of feedbacks as like, dude, we took this guy out for lunch and I thought he was like, with Kobayashi in some sort of speed eating contest, right?
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know what's going on,
no,
right?
and it's
So,
funny. So I actually, I joke around when I tell people this, but to your point, you just never know. So never order the most expensive thing on the menu. To me, it's the biggest pet peeve, right? Just because you're getting treated, don't do that. And don't get things that you need to eat with your hands. Do not get ribs, do not get fried chicken, right? Because even in an interview, during lunch at the final stages, if somebody says, hey, love you, let's go grab lunch, talk some more, until you have that offer in hand,
yeah,
you don't have that offer.
yeah.
So be mindful of those little things, just order something small and light and something you can use a fork with. But yeah, at times I do have to say that,
Well, it's probably actually good to eat before the interview so that if you're going to be there, if it's a long
yes,
day, so you don't feel like, yeah.
100%. There was one other story, and you said come up with stories, and I hope the people that I'm talking about don't ever watch this, but because they'll know who they
No,
are.
we're not mentioning names. It's okay.
I know. But I had one. So there's a huge publicly traded company here in the Valley, near Glendale. They're huge. Everyone knows about them. And there was a position for a finance manager or a senior finance manager. I've worked with this individual for many years. I actually landed him his current job, and the company wasn't doing well, so he decided to explore. So I said, so I started helping him out. He had one interview, went really well. They were excited about the in-house. He goes to the in-house and has a great chat, calls me after and says, Deanna, I think I nailed it. It was fantastic. I want the job.
Mm-hmm.
Feedback is, Deanna, oh, sorry about that. Deanna, we're passing on this individual because they dropped the F-bomb during the interview.
Wow.
And I
Okay.
couldn't believe my ears. I'm like, are you kidding me? You went to an interview. So I called this guy back and I said, what in the world are they talking about? This can't be true, right? Like, he goes, yeah, Deanna, I felt so comfortable. And that's just kind of the way I talk. And the hiring manager said a bad word as well. So I got comfortable and thought we were on the same page. So I
Wow.
used the F word. So the moral of the story is, and obviously he didn't get the job because they were turned off. The moral of the story is, even though you may feel super comfortable with somebody during the interview, do not let your guard down. If the hiring manager perhaps drafts, says something that may not be appropriate, doesn't mean you have to go with the flow, because you're being evaluated from the moment you leave to the moment, from the moment you get in to the moment you leave. And until you have an offer, you don't have an offer. So
Yeah.
just be mindful, and getting comfortable is great, right? Because it's a cultural fit, but just be mindful. You don't want to
Yeah.
get too comfortable, just like with lunch, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't want to get too comfortable. So just, and again, until you land the job, you haven't landed the job.
And by the way, this goes without saying, no booze, correct?
Oh God.
Like, yeah, okay.
Don't come in with purple Harry. I mean, I probably shouldn't say that now, but it just reminded me of a story that maybe went for like 10 years ago. I mean, everything goes these days, but just,
Yeah.
as long as you're professional, as long as you're on time, as long as you be positive in an interview. Also, it's very important. There's a lot of times that you can tell me that you're not a fan of your boss, or the company is doing poorly, or things you tell a recruiter or just yourself is not something necessarily you always want to share. So just never say anything negative about your current employer or any previous employer, about your school, about your professors. Always be positive, right?
Yeah.
Always provide examples. I think that's great too. In an interview, people, can talk, but walk your talk. So be able to, when you're interviewing, and I have so many tips under, my sleeve that,
Well, no, it's also, I think it's really, and I tell my students this, is like, if you don't know something, never make something up. That's the worst possible
yes,
thing you can
just
do.
say you don't know, but
Just
you're
say you
happy
don't
to
know, but
learn.
this is how I would go through and figure it
Yeah,
out. And it's
absolutely.
also, you also want to avoid like canned answers, because someone, if like, it's kind of like me lecturing. I mean, if I start lecturing on something, I've done this thing so many times, it's like my internal tape recorder is going off. But if
Right.
you're interviewing, you want to really, and I have a huge problem with this, of listening to what they're being asked. Don't give the answer that you want to give, but basically answer their question, and really maybe even pause, think about it, and say, yeah, this is make sure you're answering the question being asked.
Right. Companies will know when you've already prepared, and definitely prepare, but don't over prepare. Don't sound like a salesperson. Don't, again, just have a canned answer, because if you have a canned answer, they'll follow up and then you won't know what to say. So just be genuine is my recommendation. Be able to provide examples, keep your answers short, concise,
Yeah.
and like you said, listen to what's really being asked of you, because there's a lot of feedback that I get where people just talk, right? And the companies pass on them because they've just kind of lost them after they're already speaking for more than 2 minutes. So
Yeah.
just, be mindful, be you, be genuine. And again, if you don't know something, it's absolutely okay. Just let them know you don't know, you
Yeah.
haven't done this, but you're happy to learn. Or you're resourceful, but just, don't bend the truth.
And I would also say too is I've had, actually, I had a boss once who was really rude to the wait staff at a restaurant, and I should have known right then. I should have just basically walked out the door. Obviously, if you're going in on an interview, you want to treat everybody with kindness. You don't want to be a jerk to the assistant, because believe it or not, that assistant can have like a way of, she also has influence too over whether or
Yeah,
not
or
you get hired.
HR. Yeah.
Oh my God, don't. Yeah. HR, by the way, HR is there for the company. They're not there for you. They're there to protect the company,
Yes.
and they're not there for your protection or whatever it might be. I just kind of keep that in mind about basically treating everybody with kindness, and, was really just, and also too, I think with California labor law, all the different things now, that all the different trainings we have to go through as employees. I think they're now going to start mandating that if you have more than 3 employees at an organization, you have to go through all like the sexual harassment training, all those other kinds of things. So just kind of keep
Yeah.
that in mind as you're going through and doing it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Deanna, so I'm going to put once I basically post this up, I'm going to put your email. Are you good with email? Put your
Yeah,
email address. Okay. I'll put Deanna's
absolutely.
email address. And I can also basically create a link to this presentation. So if you have more questions about this, about the Century Group, but I really, really, really want to thank you for your time today. It's incredibly valuable. I know I'm almost using the full 90 minutes. I'm coming in like a little bit 9 minutes short, but if you want to get in touch with Deanna, talk about different positions, she's here. She's in LA and her firm is all over the place. So anything else you'd like to share before I stop recording?
No, well, I thank you for your time. I know that this has been in the books for a while, and I'm so happy that we're able to do it. And you know, I think accounting is a great place to be. I think there's always a demand for that. So it's a great sector, and I'm happy to help if you have any questions. You know, resume reviews, not something that we do, but again, you know, for any of your students, I'd love to help. So,
well, I think it's really like, as far as like the resume reviews go, like that's when you bring in a candidate, that's when you're going to look at their resume, right?
yes.
I mean, like that's really, and you might even come up with different versions depending on the type of job that they're applying for, right?
Yeah, we
As
do
far
that.
as like highlighting experiences.
Yeah, we do that mostly for more seasoned professionals.
Okay.
But yeah, you know, once I start working with somebody, and you know, we don't, the tricky part is we don't have a lot of opportunities for just new grads, unfortunately. Most of the roles is for somebody, again, 2+ years.
Oh no! Oh yeah, no, Deanna. Like this whole like, so I again, why you're here and like why this conversation is so valuable to me is that I have so many students right now that are in public accounting, and they're like, dude, I'm done. Right? I want
You
out.
know the feeling,
Like
right?
I need the out button. I need
Yeah,
to get out.
yeah,
But I think though, hopefully by watching this, they'll get a kind of a better sense in
yeah.
terms of like next steps. So
Yeah, we're
all right.
we're here to help. I have a lot of insights that, you know, most people don't. So not only am I able to you know, I listen to the person's needs, I listen to the company's needs, and I'm just a matchmaker. And not only am I able to help you match, I will help you prepare for the interview. I will help you negotiate. I will do all the work. Your job is just to interview and want the job and have the company want you.
Awesome. So I want to thank everybody here for joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll hopefully see you on additional videos. If there's anything else that you would like Deanna to talk about, we can set up another time, another meeting, and we can kind of go through that. So see everybody on the next video. And Deanna, just hold on 2 moments.